Oh, hello, Mr. Weinland here, and we are going now. Yes, here we go. Number two. This is take two. If you remember 13.1 for world history, because this is world history video right here. Um, if you remember, that was my first time to actually use this new technology, Screencastify. So there were times where I was like, "Oh, here's a picture of Charlemagne." Well, the pictures weren't there, so um, I'm sorry. I apologize. That I'm still learning. Still learning. Here's the funny thing: I'm 38 years old. I know a lot about some technology, but I am still learning, um, along with some of our older individuals out there, or young, or young. I'm not saying age matters, but I am learning. Just saying, all ages learn about new technology. But let's go ahead and jump into it. Again, study guide right here. There should be a Google Forms loaded for that. Be sure to either print a study guide. I'm going to try and, I should have this in print form, but also there's a digital form with Google Forms. Might be easier. And just pause during this presentation if you need to just write something down, because sometimes I will be moving fast. And I'm trying to keep these videos under 25 minutes so that way you guys aren't too bored. Anyway, but we are going to jump into chapter 13, section 2. We were talking a little bit about Charlemagne in section 1. We're going to kind of go into more about the new invaders. And some of those new invaders were what we know as the Vikings. Now, the Vikings were around the time of Charlemagne. A lot of people think, well, the Vikings, they didn't really show up until after Charlemagne. That's not true. The Vikings actually were right around where Charlemagne was running his empire, the Western Europe, with Franks. The thing is, though, is Charlemagne was a pretty strong ruler. He was able to kind of keep all these invaders at bay and kind of keep them on the edges of the empire, so that way they weren't coming in and causing problems. But they were pretty fierce. They were pretty difficult. The thing about them, and here's you can see right here the definition for them. You want to look for definition of Norsemen, and the definition is that Northmen were known as the Vikings. They came from Northern Europe. I'm going to kind of jump out of the extreme view here, and you can see right here. We can see here that the Vikings came right around this area, in the north. We also see that they, right around Scandinavia, Iceland. So mostly started out in Scandinavia and then made their way to Iceland and Greenland. But Norway's in this area, Denmark, Sweden. So much of that today in Europe. But they were the Norsemen. They basically were known as the Vikings, living in Scandinavia. They were very rural, agricultural. They were fishermen, farmers. The thing about them, though, is that there was a lot of food shortages. Though, yes, they had fish, but again, there's only so many fish in the sea. Ha ha ha! Little joke there. Also, the soil that they used for agriculture not very fertile, not always great. They had some trouble growing some crops in their part of the world. So food was a big problem for them. So how did they solve this? Did they innovate in this type of time, these rough times? What's happening right now with this whole coronavirus thing. What are we going to do? How are we going to solve this? Well, we got to find new ways. We got to be innovative. We got to be creative. Did the Vikings do that? Not exactly. They decided, hey, we're just going to take it from people. So for these resources, they went out and they need for the food, the wealth, they just took it from others. So your answer number 7, if you find number 7, Vikings began raiding Northern Europe because of what? Well, it's right here in these first 2 points. They basically needed food, they needed money, and they just decided to take what they wanted. So it's like it wasn't just food, just money. It was like, hey, you know what? You got that blanket? I want that. Taking it. So it was they basically started to begin raiding because they needed resources. They needed a source um, to survive. Now, again, like I said, I'm going to move a little fast here. So if you need to pause feel free to pause here. It's on YouTube, on Google Classroom, so feel free to pause, write it down, and then start it back up again. So the Vikings were more, though, than just people who stole stuff, raiders. They also were very skilled individuals. They knew how to build ships, and that was one of the best things about the Vikings and made them good at raiding is because of the ships they built. Crafty sailors. They were able to build heavy boats that held a lot of people, but were able to take on the waves and be stealth enough to be able to sneak in and steal some stuff. They're also great navigators. They knew how to navigate through the ocean, knew where to go. Hey, we're going to go there. We got to go there. They knew what to do. And that's what made them very skilled in their ability. So they were very prestige, very smart individuals, and they knew where to go. And one of the targets they hit was England, an island in the north that they wanted. They went in there, took their stuff, got what they needed. Same with northern France. They also would go away from their homeland, so then that way they get what they needed and then come back. They would go a little bit inland into Paris, Aachen, but sometimes not Aachen as much because of Charlemagne. It would be a little bit unsafe to make their way into that area. But what made them so good and what made them successful at being such great raiders was that they were very stealth. Like I said, they were stealth. They knew when to come in. They knew what people feared. They could come in without any warning. This is a time with no ADT. This is no simply safe alarm that system that says, brr, brr, brr. I got an alarm, at my house. My neighbors could hear it if it goes off, so no warning like that, unless they had like an animal or something that saw them, then maybe that would be their only warning, but most likely not going to happen. So but not only were they able to stealth, but they were very fast moving. They got in there quickly, got in, got out, got what they needed, burned the place down, killed others. They did capture the defenders. Sometimes they, take them in. We do see that some people were sold into slavery. So they discarded what they didn't want, and then sold some people to slavery. So the Vikings weren't always the nicest people, just going to be honest with you. But one of their biggest and favorite targets was monasteries. Why? Why monasteries? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the thing about the monasteries is, one, the monks. Their monks were not warriors, okay? And also they were easy to plunder because they didn't have a lot of defenders. I mean, eventually you do see some monasteries would get their own form of security because the monasteries may be close to certain kingdoms, but around this time, still early on, a lot of the monasteries did not have any soldiers. They just had monks, worshippers, like Mount Athos. When we watched that video about that monastery, those men who today are in that place, they're Greek Orthodox. They're not fighters. They're just worshipers. I mean, yes, they're spiritual fighters. They fight for God, but in a faithful way and by praying, not by killing people, really people in physical form. So what we see is that these individuals are easy to take out. Plus, what they had. I mean, when we saw the video of Mount Athos, what would we see there? We saw a lot of gold, especially gold in their candlesticks, gold in their chandeliers. We saw gold in just in a lot of different places. Plus, they had jeweled crosses. They also had other relics that had gold in them. So they were very valuable, and those valuables allowed the Vikings to either use as money, or they could take that stuff and use it for other things. So the thing to understand, which is your answer number 8, is the Vikings were not Christians. So were the Vikings Christians, and did they raid the Muslims to spread their religion? The answer to that is no. Obviously, they did not. So they had no problem stealing religious items. So I'm going to pull back on this one so you guys can see the whole slide. It's kind of hard with my face blocking it, but the Vikings were more than just raiders, though. To be fair, the Vikings, there were some that were raiding. Hey, we're going to raid. We're going to take this stuff and bring it home. Then there was others who were like, we're not going to do that. We're going to go settle. We're going to go find new land and kind of make our place our own place. And so that's where we see Iceland is created in the 700s. Then they eventually go and other parts of Europe. And then finally, in 982, we see Greenland, the big island, is created. 100 years later, then you see Leif Erikson go into North America, what is present-day Canada. And so you can see there's your answer at number 6 right here in red. So number 6, Vikings were great explorers who settled what present-day countries? Iceland, right there, and Canada. So like I said, you can pause if you need a little bit more time to write. I'm going to move on, move a little forward. So the Vikings, very fierce warriors, very fierce individuals. We do see Normandy is one of the settlements. We see that they were attacking northern France, led by Chief Rollo, who attacked France many times. The king of France at that time was like, dude, I'm tired of this guy attacking us. Let's just make a deal with him. And so they do. They make a deal with Rollo, and they basically get him to stop the raids. And we're like, hey, dude, how about you stop these raids and we'll give you this land in the north? And that's what they did. And the king gave the land to Rollo, who then accepted it and called it Normandy, land of the Northmen. So that's what Normandy is today. I'm going to pull back on this one so you guys can see a little bit of this slide here. So the Vikings weren't just the only terrorists of that time frame. There was other individuals causing terror in Europe. The Vikings handled mostly North and Western Europe. With the Magyars, or a different group, they handled a lot of the terrorist stuff, or they terrorized in the East. Magyars were nomads from Central Asia, which is your answer number 11. So if you look at number 11, we see that how did the Magyars differ from the Vikings? Well, they were nomads. The Vikings actually did settle in their own little homesteads, but the Magyars kind of were right around Hungary, what is present day Hungary, but they didn't really settle there. But number 12, what made the Vikings and the Magyars similar? How were the Vikings and the Magyars similar? Both of them were fierce warriors. So right there. So the Magyars were not sailors. They were skilled riders. They used a lot of horseback. They were on horseback a lot to fight their opponents. The horse actually could get up to some big, high speeds. Um, you know, that's why we, go up to 35 miles per hour. And so the horse was reliable, especially during that time when your warfare was on the ground. And so they used the horse to attack and be swift, and very careful planners, the Magyars were, in attacking. So what we end up seeing about the Magyars is that they would mostly raid France and Germany, and then they would also hit northern Italy, Western Byzantine Empire. Eventually, we would see them give up their nomadic ways, which here is your number 9. So number 9, why was King Otto finally able to defeat the Magyars in the mid-900s? Well, it's right here. Eventually, they gave up nomadic ways and settled permanent homes, but lost battle advantage of running from opposing armies. This right here, by them giving up their nomadic ways, by being able to quickly pick up what they needed to go resettle somewhere else, so they weren't attacked, that advantage was lost. That by them settling in one spot, then there was other opponents who were able to go, okay, we know where they are and we know how to attack them, and we were able to figure out ways to go after them, and that's what ended up getting them in the mid-900s about King Otto the Great, who defeated the Magyar army. We're going to talk more about that later. So we talked about the Vikings, the Magyars. Now we're going to talk about the Muslims. Now, a lot of you are going, well, what about the Muslims? I thought the Muslims was more of a religious group. No. Okay. Yes and no. The Islam is the faith, or the religion. Okay. The Muslims are the individuals who represented that religion. And the Muslims were more than just about the faith of Islam. They were also what they did in the name of Muhammad. And so they conquered quite a bit of some places. We see in 711 the Muslims conquered parts of the Middle East, much of the Middle East, and then they made their way through North Africa, eventually conquering the Strait of Gibraltar, and conquered Spain and ruled the Iberian Peninsula for more than 700 years. I'm going to pull out here just real quick and pull back on this. So the capital city of Cordoba was one of the wealthiest, most culturally advanced cities in the medieval world. And the thing about them is that the Muslims created a place in Cordoba in Spain. It wasn't just a empire of like, hey, this is our place, you can't come here. No, it was more than that. It was more than just power. They wanted to create a place of innovation and really kind of an own little renaissance per se, educational renaissance of what was going on in that era. And they created a place of tolerance where people can go there, many different faiths, Christians, Spanish, sorry, not Spanish, Jewish communities can make their way there to learn more about their faith and what the Muslims are about, and also sharing of knowledge. And that's really what they wanted to do. So your answer number 10, if we look in the study guide, did people of many religions live in peace in Muslim Spain? The answer to that is yes. Yes, they did. And so I thought I'm going to pause here on the notes real quick. So 10 is yes. I'm going to show this little clip here from Mankind. And I know we may have seen this already, but I thought it might be best to show it, just kind of explain a little bit more about Cordoba. So let's watch this real quick here about the Muslims in Spain.
Boom in trade, and a new chapter for mankind. From the trading center of Mecca, a charismatic leader emerges, the Prophet Muhammad, and a new religion. In 20 years, Islam unites the warring tribes of Arabia.
It was a particular genius of the burgeoning Islamic State to use that gold to fund a massive army that was able to push beyond the Arabian Peninsula to create a new kind of empire, a distinctly Islamic empire.
From Mecca, in modern-day Saudi Arabia, Islam spreads across North Africa and into Europe, dominating lands once controlled by the Romans. A new civilization reaches into Spain and builds a new city. Cordoba. Home to a remarkable inventor, Abbas ibn Firnas. Astronomer, engineer, inventor. He's invented a water clock, a planetarium, a magnifying glass. Now he'll risk his life for a new invention. 1,000 years before the Wright brothers, he wants to fly. An extraordinary experiment in an extraordinary city. Cordoba is home to 500,000 Muslims, Christians, and Jews. In Europe's dark ages, a beacon of tolerance and learning. 37 libraries, the knowledge of mankind, much of it rescued from ancient Greece and Rome.
What one wonders about is if Islamic scientists had not played this role of nursemaid to science, how would we have gotten here? Because in the West, we had lost that with our dark ages. How would science have survived in the West if it had not been for the Islamic scholars?
Arabs take a great leap forward in astronomy, engineering, medicine. They create algebra and simplify math. With the numbers 0 to 9, still known as Arabic numerals.
All right. So let me plug my mic back in here. All right. So I'm back. Hello. So we're not going to follow the finesse there. He survives. He tries to fly. It doesn't quite work out for him. He does float a little bit, but he survives. But doesn't quite fly like the Wright brothers did. But it definitely, his innovation is going to help inspire like Leonardo da Vinci and eventually the Wright brothers. But what I wanted to show there is that you see that science is thriving, math is thriving, and this is creating a new era in Europe. This is creating a new a new line of thinking. And like you heard there from the professor from Maryland, basically that at one point in time, Europe was not creating anything new. A lot of the science that had once been created throughout Rome and the Roman Empire was once lost. That knowledge was lost. Things that we've known for centuries from the Egyptians was lost. And the way of thinking of science and mathematics was not being used. And here come the Muslims, who not only conquer Spain, but they restore and rebuild and redesign mathematics and science and create new things like algebra. So I understand. You may not like math, but without these things, we wouldn't be successful. But Muslims, they were successful in Spain. However, didn't quite have the success making their way into France or into other parts of Europe, thanks to Charlemagne, which we talked about in 13.1. His grandfather, Charles Martel, was able to stop the Muslims from moving into France. They were able to kind of get a little bit of part of France, but not so much. In 800, 900s, we see the Muslims did kind of raid throughout Europe, and France and Italy at one point did destroy churches in Rome. But not a lot of success there. They also blocked trade from the Byzantine Empire in the Mediterranean, also looted ships, sold crews into slavery, did cut off trade to Italy. We do see the Pope had to bring in certain protection. And this is what's going to end up creating these small kingdoms that we're going to talk a little bit later on about. And then ultimately the balance of power in Western Europe shifting and changing things. We're going to see that new kingdoms are coming up in Germany and throughout France. France is going to get split up, and then you're going to see England come into this. So we're going to kind of get more into that a little bit later on. We're going to talk a little bit about manneralism, and we're going to talk about what a fief is and talk about what was it like to have a kingdom. So a lot of these things are coming, but because of the Muslims, it's going to change what Europe looks like. You're going to see that new kingdoms form and splitting up what we know as the countries in Europe today. So Muslims play a part in that. But I want to go back to the map one last time. But again, so the Vikings up here in the north have changed on how we view the northern part of this world, creating Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Iceland, Greenland. Even we talked a little bit about that in chapter 12 with Russia. And then you see the Magyars coming from the east and shaping the east a little bit. And then you see the Muslims taking parts of the Roman Empire. The Romans had once controlled this land in northern Africa and the Middle East, and then Spain, and kind of creating their own little kingdom or series of kingdoms. So pretty unique. And also right here on this map, you see the Viking longship that they use. Long, could hold a lot of men, but very stealth and slick and narrow. So not this big, massive ship, but allowed them to get in and out quickly. But just all these individuals changed and shaped the way Europe is today. But that's going to do it for World History today. Just look out for 13.3 coming up, section 3 of chapter 13. Again, if there's a student out there who needs to get a hold of me, again, about the videos or assignments or questions, just my email is Weinland, WEINLAND so Weinland at Mannford.k12.ok.us. Use your Mannford email, please, if you can, and email me. And be sure to get the message out. If you know a student who has not gotten on the Google Classroom page or gone to YouTube, let them know about this. Let them know about Google Forms. Let them know about the YouTube videos and the Google Classroom website. And I'd be glad to know what's going on. And I want to help all my students during this crisis of coronavirus. I do miss you guys. I wish you guys, I could be in the classroom to teach you all, but just the situation. We got to keep you guys safe. And I know it's a bummer, but just how life is sometimes. But hopefully this helps. Again, always reach out to me at Weinland, WEINLANDP at mannford.k12.ok.us. Reach out to me if you need have any questions. I'll be glad to help. See you next time, guys. Peace.